Hello, and thank you for joining me in for this talk. I'm Immanuel Chavoya, and today I'm going to be going over Party Like a Prodstar, building a product security program from the ground up. Before I get started, I'd like to do a shout out to all of the members of the DEF CON Security Leadership Village. Thank you for putting this together, and thank you for taking time out of your busy day to join me in for this talk. I hope you enjoy it. Let's go ahead and jump into an obligatory disclaimer. So, the following talk contains personal thoughts, ideas, and opinions. They do not represent those of my current or past employers. Any cybersecurity events, characters, and/or companies depicted in the course of this presentation are purely fictitious. Any similarities to actual events, characters, or companies are also purely or coincidental. And now that we got that out of the way, let's go ahead and get into the who am I. So, a little bit about me. I got my start in site reliability engineering at Pleiades, which is a NASA supercomputer at NASA Ames. I jumped from there to the Security Operations Center. That's kind of where I cut my teeth in cybersecurity for the most part, right? So, got my boots on the ground experience as a triage analyst, move up to triage lead, and then finally senior security analyst in their Security Operations Center. And while I really loved the Security Operations Center and NASA's mission, eventually, I landed in the private sector and I was in product security. So, product security is kind of my true love in cybersecurity. If somebody told me it existed 7 years ago, that's where I would have started. And that's why I'm here today advocating for it so that we can build out product security in organizations, mature it if it already exists. Because I just believe this is one of those pillars of security that needs highlighting, right? We have red team, we have blue team, we have purple team. Product security exists. We're here, people. Let's go ahead and be ambassadors for product security. So now we got that out of the way, I guess I'll just do a little tagging of myself, right? Follow me on Twitter if you'd like, Full Metal Packet, and or on LinkedIn under Immanuel Chavoya. All right, so why are we talking about this today? Product security, building it out as a program. Why is that important? I guess the best way that I could put this is, I'll start with a story. It was sometime after the SolarWinds incident that I started getting calls from non-tech, non-cybersecurity people asking me questions which I'd never thought I'd ever hear from people that were non-industry specific. And so, in the ensuing months, we've seen multiple major supply chain incidents, ransomware incidents, and I think this is where product security really shines. It's our job to proactively defend customers by building and shipping secure products, responding to vulnerabilities in our products, and remediating in a timely fashion. And in this way, we have a great deal. I mean, our mission is big here, right? I mean, not to overblow it, but we are effectively disrupting organized threat actors and nation states. We are strengthening supply chain requirements and needs. And we are actively resolving and closing that active exploitation time period for 0 days. That's why this is important. That's why we're here today talking about this. So if you don't have a product security team, I hope you walk away considering why you might need to build one. If you do have a product security team, I hope you can walk away with some tools on how to mature it. All right, so let's get into that. I've built out kind of a sequence of strategies for you to go through, orient, mature, or capture the maturity level, present, and roadmap to build out a product security program. And I'm going to share that with you today. So I'm going to dive into each one of these deeper later on in the presentation, but let's go high level, right? So we're going to want to identify desired business objectives, right? You get started in product security, or you're the visionary because of this talk or whatever, you want to start product security. First and foremost, I suggest you identify the desired business objectives, right? We don't do security for the sake of security. We do security to enable the business. Next, you're going to want to orient to the capabilities to assess. The reason I say this is simple because I don't want to have you make the same mistakes that I've made. Maybe you've been the young hotshot, you've gone into an organization and said, this isn't how the industry does it, or this isn't how other places do it. You burn bridges that way. You want to build bridges. You want to collaborate. You want to align. So best thing that I can share with you is orient, observe, orient, and understand why things are the way they are, capture it, measure those gaps, and then chart those to completion via roadmap or milestones. You're going to get better buy-in too. Next, you're going to want to analyze and document the maturity level. I'm going to go through how to do that, what I think is relevant. It may be different for your organization, but I'm going to give you at least a couple of tools to walk away with on how to think about it critically. Then you're going to get the fun job of presenting, and I'm going to give you some tools again to go talk to your executive team leadership, right? And you're going to have all the stuff you need, and you're going to blow their socks off with what you found and how you've presented it, because it's going to be in a way that's impactful for them, which will make you shine and hopefully get you the resources to do what you really need to do. And that's what it is we're basically advocates for product security. If you're a leader, you're trying to convince the business why the business needs you, and you're trying because we need product security, but you have to convince them as to why. So I hope these tools will help you do that. Finally, we're going to map those approved initiatives via roadmap, and I'm going to break that down, kind of how you do it, and hopefully that's helpful for you. So let's go ahead and dive on in. Identifying desired business objectives. What does that mean? The best way that I could categorize this for you is in identifying overarching business goals and requirements, right? What could that be? Sit down with your executive team leadership. Maybe the company already has a mission and vision, and then you can figure out how cybersecurity can support and enable that. You may walk away with something simply as sufficiently create a barrier to entry for threat actors such that our products are secure for use in customer environments through their entire life cycle, right? Or enable appropriate remediation strategies for observed vulnerabilities or exploitation. Now that we've kind of identified the business goals, we want to identify the strategic organizational goals. You may be at the top of your organization, you may be at the middle, it really depends, but look through your organization, talk to your peers, talk to the people that report up to you, get the information from them on what they see as gaps, what they have as constraints, and then figure out if you can map that back to the business, communicate to them, because I think this is helpful for all security. We exist for the sake of supporting and enabling the business. We do not exist simply to do security. Security is fun, the tools are fun, but if we can't communicate why it's impactful for the business, it just won't happen. So if you can help them understand that, they may be able to help you build out that strategy. So identify those strategic organizational goals. Next, we're going to orient to the capabilities to assess. So I think the best way to do this, whether you're in security operations, incident response, or especially if you're in product security, is breaking it down into three major buckets. And those buckets are people, process, or technology, right? So you're going to orient and ask yourself, is this a people, process, or technology problem? I'm going to go ahead and go through each one of these and give you questions that you can use when you're kind of formally going through and mapping and assessing. These have worked for me. You may have even better questions based on your business needs and requirements. But if you just think about it critically as, is it a people, process, or technology, and methodically go through it that way, you'll probably be able to formalize your findings in a way that's really strategic. So let's focus on people. I think first and foremost under that is the governance aspect, right? So what is the existing reporting capabilities with regards to meeting audits and identifying the current state of security? What is the involvement and investment of the executive team leadership in supporting product security projects and initiatives? What is the executive team's leadership's awareness of the importance of product security? Believe it or not, you may exist, you may have a sponsor, and at the same time, the business doesn't know why they need you. You have to go out there and kind of like stake your claim, right? Be an ambassador, let the business know why you're here, what you can do for them. You're going to be in a much better place if you can do that. If you're just sitting in your silo wondering why nobody understands why product security is necessary, it's because you didn't reach out and build stakeholder relationships, and you didn't properly communicate it. And I think by the end of this talk, you're going to have the tools to do that. So I really hope so. Next is structure under people, right? So we're going to ask, what's the organizational structure? Who reports up? Who reports down? Who reports upstream? Who reports downstream? And then, are there any cases of conflict of interest? Are there appropriate separation of duties? If you're in product security, you're closely ingrained in the dev pipeline and the ops pipeline, right? So you need to sit there and figure out, are there separation of duties sufficient that the security of the product is at the level it needs to be, and the quality of the product is at the level it needs to be. So if you're orienting to the business, you have a keen opportunity to observe those potential conflicts of interest. Next is going to be experience. As an executive or a team lead, you're going to need to understand what experience you need on your team to execute on the goals. Maybe you can just start by categorizing what experience they have. And then by the end, when you've mapped out the gaps, you can see, do the gaps match the experience? If not, put that on there as a roadmap item, get new team members, get whatever it is that you need to do, right? So first and foremost, what is the experience you have on your team? And then by the end of this, figure out the gaps and if that experience supports those gaps, or if you need to bring on new people, or if you need to do training, which leads me to my next point, training and certifications. What are the relevant trainings and certifications individuals have attended and have on your team? And is there a process currently to identify training courses that would be beneficial for your team? Um, and are there any regulatory requirements for certifications on your team, right? Think about it that way. I think that as a leader of your security team, if you're not supporting training or a path to evolving their skills, then that's us failing. So we really need to focus in on that. Jumping towards the next major bucket, it's collecting information on process, right? So we've focused on people. Now we're going to process. Under process, I've created my own framework. This has worked for me. I hope it works for you. The questions I ask here can be maybe manipulated differently for your organizational needs, but if you contextualize it into this high-level buckets, you'll probably be able to map it out. I then use these functions or these big buckets to then create playbooks, so to speak. So let's kind of go through that. There is an identify phase. And in the identify phase, when I'm trying to understand there we go, let's go back up to there. I'm trying to understand, is there a process to formalize the intake and triage, into product security? Is there a process to centrally log incidents or reports to product security? Figure out if that exists. If not, map it, build out a process, and then build out a playbook for that so it's repeatable so that you have quality. Next is the validate stage. I like to ask these questions, and again, think about it as a major bucket and then apply it to your organizational needs. Is there a process to prioritize validated reports and incidents? How do you validate reports on incidents? In addition, is there a process to validate reports of vulnerabilities or exploitation against products? So think about it that way. If you get an external report, how are you validating it? How are you confirming it? Log that under this stage, put it in your playbook, and you'll be in a much better place. The next step is the remediation phase. In the remediation phase, ask these questions, right? Is there a process to escalate remediation based on severity and impact? As a matter of fact, how do we measure severity and impact? Do you have stakeholders with transparent expectations? So to break that down, you've identified vulnerability. It's been reported to you. Your team has validated that vulnerability. You need to remediate that vulnerability. It's critical. Do you have expectations of your development team to resolve this in a timely fashion? If not, measure that as a gap. Sit down with their team leadership. Figure out how you can resolve that with an implementation of a process or people or technology, right? So that's what you're doing here through each one of these stages. And then measure it. You have KPIs, right? If you're using Jira, you can measure, are they adhering to it? You have these critical vulnerabilities. Are they resolving it in a timely fashion? And then do quarterly reviews and sit down with those team leads and make sure that they understand why it's critical and support them in getting it done as well. It's a two-way street, right? Next up is the dissemination stage. So let's say that you validated it, you've remediated it. Now you've got to get these fixes out. How do you communicate it internally? If it's an internal fix, if an external requirement, is there a process to communicate impacts and remediation strategy to external stakeholders? Is there a communication strategy to ensure all internal partners and customers get notified? And the reason I say that is because when you're disseminating, think about it this way. You have a critical vulnerability in your product. You've just disseminated it out to the public. The public is now calling your help desk. Well, you didn't tell your help desk, and they don't know, so they're escalating to you. You're burning up resources and cycles. So identify the full life cycle and how it impacts different segments of the business. Make sure that you have a communication strategy in your dissemination phase. In addition, since we're talking about vulnerabilities, product security does incorporate a lot of vulnerabilities in our products. Are you a CNA? Are you a CNA, a CVE numbering authority? If you're not and you have vulnerabilities in your products, you're allowing a third party to take ownership, in essence, of the CVEs. They're writing them, and you're not. You want control of that. I highly recommend it. reach out to MITRE, figure out what it takes, implement your CNA program. This will establish you in your industry as a leader. You'll be able to see who your peers are, and you're going to be situated very well when you do have vulnerabilities to respond to them in a quick, iterative fashion. And then last but not least is the monitor stage, right? So monitoring, I like to rely upon some of our experts in PR and marketing. I know cybersecurity likes to work, as the solo, as the rogue, but we have so much to benefit from implementing strategies and collaborations with our PR and marketing folks. The reason why is because they're already monitoring, right? They're already observing, right? So when your vulnerability that's getting actively exploited gets picked up by some news article or some news organization, your PR and marketing team can help issue a formal statement. As product security, you're experts on the products and the security of those products. You probably aren't experts on issuing formal business responses. Let the experts do that, collaborate with them. In addition to the monitor stage, they can monitor social media for concerns or active exploitation. You may be able to do that as well proactively. You may not have the resources, but they definitely can sit down with them, let them know when they see certain keywords that trigger, escalate it to your team, let them know your team exists, right? So build out those strategic relationships. You're going to benefit greatly from it in the monitor stage. Next is the technology bucket, right? So how do we collect information on technology? It's entirely contextually based upon your organization, the products, your market, right? But let me go through high level. This is something that's shared almost in every industry. A ticketing platform. What do you use? Is it sufficient? Talk to your team. Do they like it? What are the problems they have with it? Collaboration tools, right? Jira, I mean, that's a great collaboration tool, but it's mostly for ticketing. What's your collaboration tool like Slack, Teams, Jabber, whatever? Can you collaborate with your team? Can you collaborate with other teams? If it's not sufficient, identify that as a gap and resolve it. Before you instantiate new technology, reach out to other teams to see what they use to collaborate. Maybe you can get on that license. Vulnerability tracking. However you track your vulnerabilities, if it's in your ticketing system, make sure that there's sufficient fields for it, right? So what kind of vulnerability is it? Right? You want to be able to see patterns emerge. And if you're not tracking your vulnerabilities through that intake phase, right, your identify, validate phase, if you're not tracking your vulnerabilities effectively, you're not going to see the patterns emerge and you're going to miss opportunities to proactively resolve before things get into production. So figure out what your technology is for vulnerability tracking, what it exists, what it's aligned to. Talk to your people. I'm sure they have the input on that. In terms of technology for pen testing, depending on your product security program, almost certainly you're going to have a pen testing aspect to it, whether it's host based, web application based. What are the technology requirements for that? Is it sufficient? Do they need more? Are the tools effective? Are there any issues with that? And it's not just the tools, right? Sometimes it's intake of pen test requirements. How do you get it? So what are the technologies to support that? Is there a trigger in the pipeline? Is there a ticketing trigger? What is it? So think about it that way. And then last but not least, and again, this is going to be contextually based on your business, the industry you're in, the vertical. But let's say that your product security team has DevSecOps integrations. On my next slide, I'm going to go through kind of iteratively where product security tools can integrate. You may own them, you may not own them, and then that's kind of a challenge is defining them. So let's go ahead and get on over to that slide. So here's kind of high level plan, commit, acceptance, production, operations, where you can implement product security and different elements of your product security team. So these may already exist and they may exist under the QA team, the dev team, the ops team. So when you're interviewing them, when you're talking to them, think strategically ahead of the time and talk about them, right? Or talk to them. What do you have in your plan code phase for security? Do you have an IDE plugin? Do you do peer code review? Are you doing threat modeling? Well, product security, I highly suggest you do the threat modeling. And this is one of those elements that's overlooked oftentimes, but is going to reduce vulnerabilities and weaknesses in your products because before it's built, before it's shipped, you're going to be able to see what the risk boundaries are, figure out mitigating controls, and spot gaps proactively. In the commit phase, I highly suggest SaaS scans. Why it's complicated is because multiple teams building multiple products have different pipelines. How can you integrate it into all of those? Use a mono repo. If you don't have a mono repo, do you have a bigger problem? Sit down with your dev and engineering team and figure out why you have multiple different repos. get that mono repo as a goal, then integrate SAST into that, because then that's your centralized source of truth. In the acceptance phase, product security really shines here. Get your DAST scans in, right? Get your internal pen testing done on those products. Every product, every release, before it goes into production. The last thing you want to do is implement a product into production and have easily found vulnerabilities that you can't just scan for, but you need an active tradecraft expert in pen testing, and somebody out in the out in the world, some threat actor finds it and is leveraging it. That's the last thing you want. If you've missed that opportunity, find out what you can do to resolve that. In production, this is something where either you can work collaboratively to integrate these as checks, right? Server hardening requirements, configuration requirements, secrets management using Vault, etc., like that. This may not be falling under your team, but you may check that it exists and then make sure that it sufficiently aligns to any requirements your team has created. And in the operations phase, I think this is where a lot of product security exists. We really want to shift left, but in the operations phase, you have the bug bounty CVD. This is where vulnerabilities are found in your products after the fact. The more you can shift left, the more you can find them yourself, which will save you time and save you money. In addition, I think you should consider implementing brand threat intelligence, where you're monitoring the dark web for any chatter of exploitation of your customers' environments through your products, exploitation of your environments through your products, exploitation of your products in general, et cetera, et cetera. The more you proactively identify threats to your brand via your customer or your own infrastructure, the better you're going to be able to respond and remediate in a timely fashion, right? Our job as product security, take those 0 days that are actively exploited and really shorten that period of time that they're available to be exploited. I mean, you can't patch somebody's environment, but at least you can put the patch out there in the intelligence and IOCs as necessary. Okay, so where we're at today, or at this point now, is analyzing and documenting the maturity level. I'd like to walk you through what I think is important. We're going to go through the data to collect, and I think that will hopefully lead us into a place where we can formally present. So what kind of data do you collect? This is what I like to start with, right? So list of products. If you're in product security, that's probably a good place to start to build out a scope. What's our list of products? What's their life cycle? When does it start? When does it stop? And then how long do you want to support anything after the fact? List of tools and licenses. I see tribal knowledge as a major constraint in organizations, especially when it comes to tools and licenses, who has what, where is it located. Essentially, list out your tools, your licenses, and manage it in a transparent fashion. One person on your team probably knows everything. The other new hires probably are struggling. This makes it easier for that one person to not be a constraint. This makes it easier for the new hires to be effective. You want your team to be effective. List out the regulatory requirements. So data to collect. Are you an FDA aligned product security team? I've worked in that space. They have different requirements than non-FDA aligned product security teams. So know what they are, know how you're getting those requirements done, and what the gaps are, if any. Make sure that you're an active participant in the change control process, right? So are you an approver, right? Make sure that you're at least observing. And not only that, because any changes that product security implements because of findings need to align to that change control process. We're not outside the boundaries of the rules here, folks. We operate in the same pipeline as everybody else. We're putting up guardrails. We are not the sheriff. We're not here to tell people how to do. We just want to implement security. So align to the change control process. You will have much happier peers. And then help desk. What does this mean? So in terms of product security, build out training for your help desk team so that they know when to spot something that should be escalated to your team. And then not only that, you're building and facilitating a two-way bridge with your help desk team. And those are your tier one folks. Those are the folks which you may spot with special talents and skills that you can then train or transition into product security, right? They're going to have skills that are very valuable. So build out that relationship, build out training for them. They're going to help facilitate early identification of product security issues and make sure that you're happy and the customers are happy. And now you have a new source for new hires as necessary. This is one of my favorite areas to spot easy wins, especially when I go to executive leadership, or especially when I'm new to an organization and I want to get buy-in, I want to get strategic alliances. Meet with your respective stakeholders and take notes of their challenges. This is the polite way of saying, how is product security messing up? How are we not doing a good job today and making your lives harder? I guarantee you they're going to have feedback for you. listen with open ears, think strategically about it. How can you put this into action on your roadmap? At the very least, acknowledge it. If you can't do it today, whatever their concerns are, at least acknowledge it and say, okay, we have a cycle constraint. Let me know what the priority is for this and how it's, adding constraints for you and your team. And then I will go back and try to reassess and prioritize as necessary. And we'll work this through to closure. At the very least, you have to listen and orient. And then this is kind of where the next point comes in. Identify those critical and high and medium priority goals and really focus in on what you can do and you can't do. You can promise the moon, but you can really only do so much given the limited amount of resources. So identify those critical priority goals and execute them and roadmap them accordingly. Other stakeholders understand. They have constraints too. They're not expecting the moon from you, but at the very least, if there's a critical concern from them, address it as such. Okay, so when we formalize and present, this is kind of the place where you are gonna shine, right? So in the beginning, like I said, don't go in there pointing fingers, telling people it shouldn't be done this way, it should be done this way. Now you've observed, you've oriented, you've collected information, and you need to present it to the people who can give you the authority and resources to execute your vision. So what do you present to executive leadership or the board? So take into consideration, it may be different for each organization, but I like to start with a program vision and mission statement, a charter, our current capabilities as observed, our current gaps as observed, and then a roadmap, right? At least high level. I like 1 year, but at least high level, what is it that you as the product security leadership are going to do to resolve those gaps? And then that's where you're asking for budget or resources, and that's where you're communicating why those gaps matter for the business. So let's go ahead and dive into program vision and mission statement. Depending on how you structure your product security team, I've structured mine this way. You may be different, but it kind of follows logic. If you have a CVD P-cert elements, right, part of your vision or mission statement may simply be to protect customers and products and the company from externally known vulnerabilities. If you have a pen testing elements, one thing that's really important, especially in mission statement and vision, is hey, we're going to represent the company in pen testing and product security communities, right? We're going to be the pillar of the community we want to see. That's how you build out brand excellence. That's how your team stays satisfied because they're engaging with their peers and they're staying up to date and current. Brand protection, right? We are the single source of truth for CVEs and vulnerabilities that are publicly known. Brand protection is important, and product security is doing brand protection because those active exploitations, they hurt your brand. Vulnerabilities, they hurt your brand. Okay, customers not knowing how to patch appropriately because maybe there's not a central place to disseminate that information. It's hurting your brand. It's hurting your sales. We are such an important facet that's been overlooked. That's why I'm advocating for this today. And then also for DevSecOps. How do you communicate what the mission and vision is for that? Well, I think the best way that I can communicate it is, a DevSecOps oriented team with business objectives that require technical solutions. So I think that's completely up to you as you've developed your product security team. It'll have different components. You'll have to determine what your vision and mission statement is for each one of those components. In terms of a charter, simply put, a charter is going to most likely be what is your purpose? What is your mission statement? Who are your stakeholders? Who's your sponsor? If you're lucky, you have a chief product security officer, COO, or CISO. Definitions. This is key because not everybody's a cybersecurity expert, but if you can provide definitions, people will be much happier reading this. Scope, right? You've probably determined scope is products, A through Z from, beginning of life to end of life, unless there's critical concerns or otherwise. And roles and responsibilities. This is what you communicate out there. And then you're going to go ahead and formally present your roadmap with those gaps. How you prioritize it and then how you communicate it may be different. I liked the Phoenix project. And so for you, I've kind of like formalized it in a way that aligns to that. So I think of the work that you've assessed to be categorized under 4 different high-level categories. And then you kind of break that down for your team. So think about it this way. You have business projects. They could be, we're releasing product A1 this quarter. Well, is that business project a critical concern? Yes. So then your team, right, your CVD P-cert element, what is their duty or functionality? Your DevSecOps, what is their duty or functionality? Your pen testing, what is their duty or functionality? How does it map through that Q1? what are the deliverables, what are the metrics. So this is what you can present to executive leadership. Then you can take it down to your team for buy-in. But this is how you kind of roadmap it and show like, this is what I've observed. These are the gaps. This is how I'm going to get it done in Q1 through Q4. This is what I'm delivering, and these are the metrics I hope to achieve from this. Um, so that way you've kind of taken all that information and made it human friendly. The more the more complexity you add, the less likely people are to buy into this. And I think the Phoenix project does a great job of kind of high level categorization of workloads, right? So business projects are pretty obvious. Internal projects could just be like, hey, we need to implement DAST. That's an internal project. It's not a business project. It's not sales. It's not specifically strategic to the business, but it's internal. It's a high priority goal. Changes could simply be, um, bug fixes, vulnerability remediation. It depends on criticality, right? So this is all dependent on you. Improvements and stuff of that nature. And while the fourth category of unplanned work is specifically low, I think that's a misnomer. We all kind of know unplanned work is high priority because it comes in ad hoc, out of the blue, stop, drop, get this done. If you can manage your unplanned work, you're going to be in a good place. I put it as low, but again, I feel like it's a misnomer here. So strategically go through this and kind of figure out how you can take your gaps, how you can communicate it to your executive leadership. Your roadmap may not look like this, but this is at least a good tool to start thinking and formalizing what that might look like. And that's my talk. I wish I had more time to dive deep into each one of these subjects. Um, each one of them could be an hour length talk. I think hopefully you've been able to understand how to build out a product security, program like a Prodstar, right? From beginning to identifying the capabilities required, to orienting to the capabilities to assess, to taking a measurement of gaps, to then formalizing and presenting it, and then mapping to a roadmap. I think those are the key things. If you have that and you have some of the tools to take away, you're going to be able to walk away and mature your organization. I really hope this was informative. Please reach out to me if you have any questions or if you want to collaborate or learn more. Full Metal Packet on Twitter, Immanuel Chavoya on LinkedIn. I really appreciate all of you for joining me in for this talk. I hope you have a wonderful day.